The next up is a board and committee update for the Affordable Housing Trust Board. And just while Wayne's getting up to the seat, we're trying to get pretty frequent with this to get board updates from our boards and committees. It's really important to hear about the exciting work that they're doing and let the people at home know about all these things that are going on. It's hard sometimes to manage to get all the committees to come forward because they're busy. So we really appreciate you being here tonight, Wayne.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you. Hi, thanks everybody. I'm Wayne Beitler, Community Planner. I'm staff support for a variety of programs and commissions here in town. One of them is the Affordable Housing Trust. The chair, Nikki Dastumian, sends her regrets. She works in Boston, and 5 of the 7 members are working mothers with very young children, so no one could make it tonight except me and Mr. King. So please feel free to, at the end of each slide, ask any questions that are project specific, and then we can have a longer exploratory conversation if you want about some details at the end. So the Affordable Housing Trust was founded at town meeting in 2008. It's a 7-member volunteer board. The mission is fourfold: develop, preserve, and advocate for housing opportunities for a broad range of income levels. It's not just very low income, it's also workforce housing is a very important component of what the trust does. It promotes housing choice in Easton so that people who want to live in, move to, or stay in Easton have options. It helps eliminate discrimination in housing and increase awareness of fair housing laws. And it takes a leadership position in affordable housing development and planning for fair and affordable housing. As background, and I know this group has touched on it in the past, the median single-family purchase price for a single-family home in Easton is about $450,000. And so the trust is very challenged to create affordable housing at a reasonable and sustainable price point. We've done several projects quite recently, and several are ongoing, and I'm happy to run through them. And magic. So one of the big long-term ones we've been working on is a formerly town-owned property at 300 Foundry Street. At town meeting and special town meeting in 2016, the trust got permission to deaccession that property, which has some significant development challenges to fulfill a local need for housing, affordable housing for folks with intellectual disabilities. The trust did some site engineering, perk testing, wetlands delineation, and so on. Issued an RFP, had a couple of good responses, and the winning response is from a local regional group called the Brockton Area Multi-Services Incorporated, BAMC. And they will be putting in a affordable group home with 8 bedrooms for individuals with acquired brain injuries. That picture is of a property of theirs in Worcester. So it's going to look somewhat like that when it actually happens. Like I said, it's going to be 8 bedrooms. There was a lot of site work involved, and the Affordable Housing Trust has made a $350,000 grant to BAMC to help with the incredibly expensive site work that's needed there. That project transferred to BAMC January 2nd of this year, and folks may remember how very long it took to get a lot of the paperwork in good shape to get that done. They're going through permitting now, and to help keep the project affordable to the nonprofit developer or the nonprofit service provider and owner. Our land use agent is essentially being peer reviewed so that they don't have to pay for peer review for the conservation issues, and the building department has confirmed that they can waive a lot of the construction permit fees. So does anyone have any questions about the 300 Founders Street project?
I'd just like to make a point that for people at home, or just a refresher, the state requires cities and towns to have 10% of their housing stock deemed
Correct.
as affordable according
Yes.
to
Yeah.
what their affordable designation is.
Yeah.
And so for these 8 units, all 8 will go towards our
Correct.
subsidized housing inventory.
Yes.
Creating 8 units more of affordable housing, all of them. So
Yeah.
that's really, really a great use of funds.
Yeah, thank you for that.
And it's a great opportunity to help
Absolutely.
people that really need that,
Yeah.
that type of housing.
Yeah,
So
there's a real critical need for it. And, touching back to the trust's work to try and keep things as cost-effective as possible, as Dottie mentioned, each bedroom counts towards our 40B requirements, and so it's about $44,000 or so per unit, about $44,000 roughly. And again, I think it's helpful to compare all of these numbers with the median single-family purchase price in Easton of $450,000.
It's a good value.
Yeah, yeah. On the next, so the trust looked at some peer towns and did a pilot project based on one that's been fairly successful in Norfolk. So in 2018, the trust bought a single-family house, and it ended up needing more work than the inspection had initially indicated. So the trust replaced the roof, the windows, upgraded some electricity. Excuse me, there was a number of other things that needed to be done. The trust carried it over the winter, which was fun, and carried out a lottery, marketed it, and had a lottery and sold it at an affordable price to a qualified buyer in September of 2019. So that has created 1 unit of affordable family housing, and at the end of all of that, it was about a $235,000 net investment from the trust. So we carried it for about 1.5 years. One of the challenges was the public construction procurement requirements, trying to get some of the work done, and also, and this is true everywhere, it's actually really hard to get contractors to do work. So there were not folks really lined up to get the work done, so that was a bit of a challenge. And the trust is sort of doing a project debrief to contemplate if this is a sort of project we'd want to do again in the future. But at the end of the day, we have a affordable family home for a family that actually already lived in Easton at the time.
There's
So-
an incredible need for that. I was there the day that they had the open house
Yes.
for people to come in and take a look at it, and
Yeah.
the cars were lined down the street, and they actually ran out of applications that day.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, there are so many people in need of housing right now. In our own community, like you
Yes.
say, these are
Yeah.
people that lived in Easton.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge success story, and it's very hard to make the numbers work on a project like that in Easton, because
Yeah.
there's not a lot of houses available at
Correct.
a price point that you
Yeah.
can buy that and
Yeah.
make a
And
smaller
they need a lot of
investment.
work. Yeah.
And Wayne, that ultimately ended up being sold to a qualified buyer for, do you know, what was the sale price?
We sold it very low at 160.
Right, but think about what an incredible and non-existent opportunity that is in the market, right, for folks who, to Dottie's point, already live here and just need a quality home. And the average house is $450. I mean, that's median. If you pull Zillow up, God help you.
Yeah.
So I agree that it's
Yep.
a wonderful success.
Yeah, thank you. And again, this is also workforce housing. Folks who buy affordable homes have to have a mortgage and an income to support that mortgage. So it helps support local workers and local businesses. And folks may remember this one. This is 10 Electric Avenue. And this was a 3+ year, and emphasis on the plus. It was been given to understand longer than that. So this was a small parcel that was in tax title. and the town owned a previous tax title parcel right next to it. And it's at least a 2-year process to get a property through the tax title process and into town ownership. And it took the trust quite a while to get that done, did some site engineering, of course, before we really started that to make sure it was in fact developable, flagged the wetlands, got a perk test, put out an RFP for a nonprofit developer to create a unit of affordable ownership housing. The property transferred to Habitat for Humanity in March of 2019. They had a groundbreaking in October that I think some folks were able to attend, so they did some site clearing. They have a partner family, which includes someone who actually works in the Easton schools at the moment. So they're very excited about that. And they will start construction when the weather gets a little more mild later on this year. And in addition to the effort of bringing it to the point where it could be developed and doing the site work, the trust also provided a $30,000 grant for Habitat, which of course, as folks know, is volunteer and donation driven. So this is a pretty exciting model with a really great nonprofit development partner. And they did a lot of outreach in Easton, and it seems to be quite well received with a lot of public support in town. So we're pretty excited.
How many Habitat homes is that we have now?
I think this will be our 3rd, possibly 4th.
Okay.
Yeah, the trust did one on Highland at the very beginning of my tenure. That was several years ago. And there's 1, if not 2 others in town. Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah, they do really great work, and they're just a joy to deal with.
Like you said, they are a very good partner.
Yeah, they're wonderful. And folks may remember, so this is 10 Morse Road, and there's a larger property that's in Chapter 61A, which is a property tax program for agricultural land or open space land to not be taxed at its full development level so that it can stay in, say, agricultural production or forestry production or recreation, like a day camp or something like that. So this was 61A agriculture. When a property comes out of 61A, the town has a right of first refusal to buy it for a bona fide signed purchase and sale. So the larger parcel was divided out and created 2 new upland zoning compliant frontage parcels with good perk tests and engineered septic systems on them. The trust explored trying to acquire both or at least one. The trust has funds to buy one, and worked with the select board, and thank you. The select board decided and voted in December of 2019 to exercise the town's right of first refusal on one of the parcels. The trust is providing the $220,000 purchase price. We'll also make a grant available for development. We'll be issuing an RFP for a nonprofit developer to build 1 or 2 units of affordable family housing on that parcel. We're on track to close in late February, after which we'll put out that RFP for a nonprofit developer to respond. So we're pretty excited about this one. It's to the point we've touched on several times in the past. It is incredibly hard to get a zoning compliant upland frontage parcel that you can develop easily. They're really difficult, especially for 220. We got an appraisal, and it came in higher, so it definitely justified that purchase price.
It's also incredibly difficult to find a nonprofit development corp that is willing to come out and build only 1 or 2 units of affordable housing.
Exactly.
Usually they're building, a much bigger places. So.
And that has been a sort of meta challenge for Easton. The financing and the nonprofit institutions are looking at 20 and 40 unit developments, which is great, and it's great projects at scale, but there are a few places in outer suburban towns where that is really workable. So it is to Dottie's point, very hard to get a developer to build small-scale affordable housing. Our next project, this is 26 Pequannock Avenue. The Select Board, again, thank you, approved the trust's acquiring this vacant property from the Housing Authority for $235,100. We got an appraisal back, and it's below the appraised value. The Housing Authority has been trying to rehab this semi-derelict building for many years, but again, to the procurement and prevailing wage requirements, costs were coming back at about $800,000, which is unfeasible. So they, the Housing Authority has very few actual family housing units in its portfolio in Easton. So they got state permission to de-accession the property and combine it with a small state grant they already have, and use the proceeds to buy an existing home in good repair as a replacement unit. And the Affordable Housing Trust will acquire this, demolish this pretty derelict cabin, and put out an RFP for a nonprofit developer, again, to build 1 or 2 units of affordable family housing. Again, with a $30,000 grant from the trust for the site costs. This is scheduled to close by mid-February, after which the trust will do the demolition and then issue the RFP. So again, it speaks to the difficulty in getting building lots in town and doing small-scale developments. We also have a down payment assistance grant program for low-income first-time home buyers. What it is essentially, the way to think of it is the town is buying a permanent affordability restriction on a market rate housing unit. So an income qualified first-time home buyer would combine a significant down payment grant from the trust with a qualifying mortgage, buy a market rate house or condo. It converts to affordable. It can only be sold in the future to a income qualified household. And the grant is 35% of the purchase price, or $95,000, whichever is lower. And again, keeping in mind Easton's median market rate home price of $450,000. The trust issued one grant this past June for $70,350. We have 2 viable applications under review at the moment. And since the trust started this program several years ago, they've done 6 grants totaling about $400,000. So these are the actual sort of unit creation projects we've done. The trust has spent or committed about $1.2 million in the last several years to create at least 13 units. If some of these could be redone as 2 families, that might be 15. So it's 13 units for about $1.2 million, current or recent. So that's a little more than $91,000 per unit. So it's the trust's work to create different opportunities, different housing choices, with a focus on incredibly scarce, affordable, single-family homes. So that is a quick summary of what the trust has done recently and is doing at the moment. We also have a few other things that we're working on. So the trust is responsible for updating Easton's housing production plan. Our current one, they're good for 5 years. It started in February of 2017, so it's good through January 31 of 2022. We submit annual reports to the state. As you know, Easton has several creative and forward-thinking smart growth and development districts, Queeset Commons, the 40R Smart Growth District, the Northeastern Village. The Shovel Works was developed partly with a tax increment finance district. The town has to submit annual reports on that. The trust also researches and applies for and administers housing-related grants. Recently, the town got a Housing Choice Capital Grant. The town received Housing Choice designation from the state for proactive workforce housing creation. This allowed the town to apply for and receive a capital grant, which we applied towards the design costs for the Five Corners sewer expansion. So that's coming up for renewal, and we're intending to reapply in the next month or so. And then the trust also works towards Easton's 40B subsidized housing inventory. So 40B is a state law from 1969 that suburban towns need to have 10% of their housing units restricted affordable to households making 80% or below the area median income, which in Easton I think is about 75,000 for a family of four. So again, it's workforce housing. And if a town does not have 10% or making substantial progress towards 10%, a developer can override local zoning, and as long as it creates some affordable housing. And Easton has been incredibly proactive in planning for this and in being in a negotiating position with developers to direct development where it best serves the town's interests and secures additional financial benefits such as sewer expansion to support diverse commercial development, other mitigation funds. I believe the Avalon project helped pay for the study that allowed the town to secure the grant for the new school project. The Board of Zoning Appeals recently approved a comprehensive permit for phase 2 of the Avalon project. This brings the town back into 10%. So we're back in safe harbor, and we'll submit that paperwork as soon as the comprehensive permit is finalized. Other smaller projects in addition to Avalon 2, we've got Eastondale Cottages, Queeset Commons, of course, Meadowview Commons. There's a planned project of mixed income, mixed use, commercial and residential at 661 Washington Street, the old Korea's Plaza. There's a small subdivision called Weber Farms going in. Again, our 40B goals are going to change after the 2020 census. We don't necessarily know what our number of year-round housing units will be. We have sort of projections of what that would be. That's a big part of what the 5-year housing production plan does. So we can also talk a bit, if folks are curious, about Easton's current and anticipated 40B and subsidized housing inventory numbers. I put together a little spreadsheet and handed that around, and I'm happy to talk about that.
So everyone should have, and I believe a digital version of this was forwarded as well. The aforementioned spreadsheet that kind of touches on some key data that is of interest to the board and the community. It includes both our subsidized housing inventory as it stands today, and it also touches on what Wayne just spoke through, that once the 44 unit Avalon 2 is added to our SHI, that we will be back over our 10% requirement under the law, about 10.3. However, the SHI is tied to the decennial federal census, which is coming, as the town clerk spoke about a couple meetings ago. And this lays out on the left-hand side what we can expect the needs to be in the next 10 years as far as projects in the pipeline to keep us moving in the right direction. I think when Avalon was coming through, a question was asked to Dottie, I believe, and I think Dottie answered it. Or I did. One of us did. The collective group speaking did that. When that project was going through the LIP process of a board, it very consciously, no one of the board said this is the last one, right? Because that's not how 40B works as a statutory matter, let alone a planning one. And that it would get us into safe harbor, but I think everyone was very conscious, and we were very clear with folks that then there's the decennial census, and we're going to have a new number to work towards. And so this sheet kind of identifies where we may be as far as what our needs are, what's in the pipeline for permitting as far as approved projects, what the kind of risk as far as units that may come off of a subsidized housing inventory are, and where that leaves us for planning purposes.
The very short thumbnail sketches were, we currently have 8,105 year-round housing units, so our 10% is about We now have 789, that's 9.73 with the 44 from Avalon. That'll bring us to 833, so that'll put us over the 10%. Projecting ahead, and again, it's a projection. You don't know until you get there. But the 2020 census, the projection is that our 10% number after the 2020 census will be 914, up from the current, 800 some. So of course we currently have 789. That does not include the Avalon 44. You take that away from the 914 projected. So there's also a possibility that 132 units might drop off. That's highly speculative. They may never drop off. So worst case scenario, we'd need 257 units. However, many of the affordable units may not drop off. They may remain, rentals, or may remain restricted affordable. Most will stay restricted affordable in Easton, affordable in Easton. We also have anticipated growth at Queesit Commons. So if Queesit Commons builds out as anticipated, that will take care of the great majority of Easton's anticipated need. We also have several others, as I mentioned, in the pipeline at Eastondale and Meadowview, Weber Farm. The trust is, of course, producing a number itself. There's the project at 661 Washington. So worst case scenario, the ones that could possibly drop off do drop off. And everything in the pipeline actually gets built. Our net need would be 24 units. So again, that's very speculative, but Easton, thanks to many years of proactive planning and attention, is in really quite good shape for a suburban town for its workforce housing.
Is there any type of time that you are permitted once you get a new census result in order to achieve the 10%, or is it just instantly recalibrated and you fall below the 10% threshold?
Unknown.
It'll take probably about a year before we actually get the 2020
Exactly.
census numbers,
Yeah.
but once those numbers are out, then the time.
It just recalibrates.
Yeah.
Recalibrates, but we should follow up with DHCD on that, but I believe traditionally in order to qualify for Safe Harbor, the only way to do that is not only to be at 10%, correct? It's if you have an approved
Yes, you have-
affordable housing production
Yep.
plan. The last one was 2017, their 5-year plan, so in 2022, which is probably
Correct.
going to be right around the time that decennial census result
Yep.
comes out, we will be, as always, on the ball and have a new housing production plan being developed to come through the board for approval. And then if you make incremental progress towards that, right, I believe
Right.
if you approve 0.5%, you get
Yes.
1 year, and a full percent, you get 2.
And you do not get more than 2 years.
Correct. And
yeah.
you can't keep getting the 1-year extension. You can't kind of carve it up to 0.5% 4 times and get it
Right. Yeah.
So there's a couple of options baked into the law. So we'll have the foundation there as far as having and keep maintaining affordable housing production plans that are current, which the town has done a great job at. Wayne, the Affordable Housing Trust Board, and the Select Board. And we will need to be working on promoting, getting projects through the process. There are some here, but the single largest, of course, is Queesit Commons, right? That's an approved project. However, the timeline of that development agreement is subject to economic terms, which is obviously quite a broad
But also,
catch-all.
when you are a proactive community and you're doing all of this the right way, developers recognize that.
Yep.
And you're not going to, they know you're sophisticated. They know
Yep.
that your people know what they're doing. They know how to get it done. And you're not really going to attract developers that are going to bring bad projects your way and want to fight with you. We've talked to some of them before that have said, listen, we want to talk to you. We're not going to get into a lawsuit. We know that you're selective in the kind of opportunities that you
Yeah.
want. And that really bodes well for us and allows us a really good negotiating position
Exactly.
to leverage other things that good housing brings, like renovating the fire station
Yes.
or helping to, expand roadways or putting money towards the school project. So we've we've done a good job with that.
We've been
I just
very
want to
successful.
say one other thing is that, we have a master plan that, hundreds of people in the community participated in, and in the housing part of it, it talked about the need for diverse housing for
Yeah.
options.
Yeah.
And that carries through from the housing production plan, still gives that information. And then we have a 5-year action plan that talks about how we're going to get there. Just some numbers I just pulled out of this right now that, really strike me. For the 2010 through 2012, 54% of Easton residents that rent are cost burdened, which means that they're spending more than 30% of their income
Yep.
on their rent. And 34% of homeowners are cost burdened in our town, spending more than 30% of their income on their mortgage. So that's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot of need, and I think we have to think about that when we're looking at where our parents are going to live, when they're
Yes.
going to downsize, and what if somebody, has a disability challenge that they need, or where are our kids going to live when they're looking for places. So
Exactly.
balancing the need for housing with the community need is really important, and I'm very proud of the Easton community for supporting these types of housing and for continuing to vote for things that help move this forward.
Yeah, that's a very, very key point. Easton has been very proactive in really working on this, and it's certainly borne fruit.
Well, I know that one of the last times that I was there when they were looking at CPA funds, there was a little bit of a criticism that some of the CPA funds that the town gets goes towards housing and affordable housing. And they said that, well, the Affordable Housing Trust has a lot of money in their bank. And that was purposeful. They were doing that to save up so that they could get these projects. You can't do them with $50,000. You have to have the money to do them.
Yep.
So I hope that the CPA committee will take that into consideration this year when they're looking at, funding that, because
Yeah, thank you.
that is part of the action plan that we had prepared.
Yep.
And you've clearly demonstrated that you can make good use of the money, good thoughtful use of that taxpayer money. And Chuck, I just want to thank you for all the great work that you're doing on that committee too.
Thank you. I've been led very ably by Mr. Beitler guiding us and me through the process. And it's incredible to me, it's a pretty significant knowledge base that's being dealt with here. I think anyone that's been listening tonight can detect that. And also the chair of our committee, Nikki Dostumian, has done a great job in,
Yep.
in reaching out and to networking and helping to make things happen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thanks.
It's always great to hear from you.
It's a pleasure.